For over 150 years, the Republican Party has been home to some of our nation's greatest leaders and to its most enduring ideas.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We are not enemies, but friends. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
The principles upon which our party stands have always endured and persevered. From our beginning, ours has been the party of the union, of holding a fractured country together as one indivisible nation. Our party stands for the rule of law. We are pledged to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We support the peaceful transfer of power. Our party once stood for fiscal responsibility. We renew our historical commitment to a sound economy. Our party stands for free enterprise. We support the private sector as the source of prosperity against big government interventions. And our party stands for peace through strength. We believe that a peaceful world depends on a strong America that is steadfast in opposing aggression of Russia and other hostile regimes. Join us at our Republican legacy. I can't hear. The program is starting. I thought my pictures on, but I think I've been introduced. Can you hear me? Okay. Chris, first of all, let me say how appreciative I am of you and everybody else who's been involved in our Republican legacy. I think you're just doing a terrific job, and I'm very positive about what the future holds. I want to say a word about why I think that our mission is so important, not just for the Republican Party, but for our country. We are more than just sort of old geezers who want to bring back the good old days of the past. I think what we're doing is very important to where America is today. What's happened in politics is that essentially the political center has been abandoned by both parties. The Democratic Party has moved very, very far to the left. It really is a caricature of what it used to be. The Republican Party and its populist iteration has moved very far from the center. So with neither party competing for where most voters, I think, are, the country is faced with the kind of choice that it had in the last election between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, which was not an attractive choice for us to have. So it's important for us to establish a Republican Party that is a conservative party and that is a responsible party, and that is one that can appeal to where the average American, I think, is. So we've focused on 5 principles that have historically defined what the Republican Party is. And these 5 principles are really basic. One is respect for the rule of law. And that contrasts with, for example, challenging the credibility of elections, of judicial decisions, January 6th, and I think even more generally than that, the rule of law, the constitutional structure that we have, where James Madison's great concern was the concentration of power in one place or in one person. Well, that's happened in the current iteration of the Republican Party. There's one person who really is making the decisions for governmental policy, regardless of the role of Congress, which has been relegated to almost like an appendix of American government. The second principle is unity, and that was the great point that Abraham Lincoln made so consistently in his time. With malice toward none, we are not enemies but friends, and all of that, and trying to hold the Union together. Compare that to the current appeal to a sense of white grievance, that white people are being undermined by immigrants, by African Americans, by what's going on in universities, by what's going on in government and corporations, the elites, and so on, all designed to make people angry rather than united. Fiscal responsibility, that it almost goes without saying that that's a principle of the Republican Party. But in the first 4 years of Donald Trump, the national debt increased 40% in just 4 years. And then we have this so-called bill now that is supposed to try to solve everything, but the predictions on what it does to the national debt is to increase the national debt anywhere between $2.3 trillion and $6 trillion in the decade ahead. The private sector, Ronald Reagan would be rolling over in his grave if he knew about this tariff plan that we're in. It's massive government interference in the course of the economy, very destructive to the country. And then peace through strength. I don't think that any Republican back in the day would have raised any question at all about supporting Ukraine or about being a steady partner in NATO or supporting our allies or being friendly to, let's say, Canada, for starters. So these are basic principles of the Republican Party. And it's not just that the current iteration of the party is different. I mean, we've always been a party with people with difference of opinions on a whole variety of things. But this is the opposite. The current iteration is the opposite of the fundamental principles that have held the Republican Party together now for ever since, 1854, when the party began. So this is fundamental. It's basic. It is important, I think, for the future equilibrium of America to reestablish a responsible conservative party. And I think that if we really push this, if we put our energy behind it, if we really make it just a cause, really, a cause that we engage in, we're going to succeed. We're going to succeed because the average American isn't some angry person. The average American isn't somebody who is on the fringe of politics or is some kind of crazy person. The average American is a decent person who wants to live a decent life and wants a government that they can have confidence in and that is, back to the essentials that our party has stood for. So I really appreciate what we're doing in our Republican legacy. I'm excited about our future, and I really want to encourage all of us to redouble our efforts to make this a real project for all of us.
Hi, I'm former Congressman Charlie Dent, one of the original founders of Our Republican Legacy. I want to take a moment to thank former U.S. Senator Jack Danforth for his leadership in establishing Our Republican Legacy, an organization dedicated to returning the Republican Party to core principles and values that has sustained it for so many decades, right back to Abraham Lincoln. In fact, Abraham Lincoln was the one who believed in the Union, keeping our great nation together, not dividing it. And that is a core principle of our Republican legacy, along with the rule of law. We believe in the Constitution and the rule of law, and too often there are too many who are ignoring that core principle. We believe in fiscal responsibility. We know that our nation's debt load is unsustainable, and as a party that has embraced center-right policies over the years, we need to do something about that. We believe in peace through strength. We believe in embracing allies and rejecting tyrants and autocrats like Vladimir Putin. This is another core principle that we feel has been unfortunately set aside by many in this MAGA movement. So these are some of our core principles, and I am just here to say that we need to identify people throughout the United States who share our beliefs, who share our values. There are lots of us out there. You know, we're told that there is no alternative to the MAGA agenda, to the MAGA narrative. We would argue there is. And that's why what we're doing here at Our Republican Legacy is so important, and why it is critical that we identify people throughout the nation and build a grassroots movement to push these values and principles, again, that have sustained our party since its inception. Again, thank you for allowing me to join you. I'm former Congressman Charlie Dent. I leave it back to you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Comstock, and I'm a former member of Congress from Virginia. Thank you for joining us today and being part of our Republican legacy. I believe ORL's mission is so vital today. It is so important that we have a center-right conservative party that once again respects things like the rule of law, our Constitution, free market principles, and respecting and working with our allies abroad. I'm proud to be a founding member of our Republican legacy. And in the weeks and months and years ahead, I look forward to working with you and doing the hard work on the national and state levels so we once again can have a strong center-right conservative Republican Party. Thank you.
My name is Andy Eastmont. I'm the Illinois State Chair for ORL. And I'm also a trustee in my village in Illinois, and I've been involved in Republican Party politics for years. I consider myself an Eisenhower McCain Republican, and I was attracted to the 5 simple principles that ORL stands for immediately when I saw how clear they were. And without principles, you don't know where you're heading in the future. So I think that's really going to be helpful to getting our mission out to other people. And I look forward to helping build ORL in Illinois.
Nate Bell, Arkansas chair, former Arkansas lawmaker. I became a Republican as a teenager because of Ronald Reagan. But to paraphrase Reagan, I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. I want it back.
I'm RJ Lyman. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm an original edition Rhino. Massachusetts is a blue state, but we've had Republican governors for 24 of the last 35 years. Just 2 quick sets of data. Republican Party registration has always been through that period in the low teens. And those two governors who sought re-election in Massachusetts each barely squeaked in, winning with 50.2 and 48.7%. But 4 years later, one of them was reelected with 71% of the vote, and the other with 68% of the vote, which tells me that in my state anyway, and I would argue in many of our states, the Republican Party is toxic. A Republican candidate may be tolerable, but our Republican principles are terrific, and we shouldn't forget that. I want to end by just outlining at least how I see the difference between myself, and I suspect many of you, and Donald Trump. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the fundamental premise, although not all of the promises, of the New Deal. In a rich society, we should give people a hand up, but not a handout. I'm not sure Donald Trump understands the Enlightenment. So as far as I'm concerned, our Republican legacy is about making the Republican Party Republican again.
Thanks, RJ. I'm Chuck Brown, chair in Michigan. I'm an attorney, a past Election Day volunteer for the Michigan GOP and the Republican National Lawyers Association. We are coming up on an anniversary. June 9, a week from Monday, is the third anniversary of Liz Cheney's remarks to the January 6th Commission, wherein she said, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain. There's a couple of parts to that that are noteworthy. One is calling out Republicans who are defending the indefensible. And of course, the last one, their dishonor will remain. The one I want to focus on is the middle part where Congresswoman Cheney said, there will come a day when Donald Trump is gone. It's 3 years since she said that. Soon, there will be a time when Donald Trump is gone. And I think now, with a group like this, we're preparing for the next phase. And I think that's important.
Hi, my name is Lynn Schmidt, and it is my honor to represent Senator Danforth's home state of Missouri as state chair. I had been active in my local and state Republican Party up until about 2016, and I was a delegate to the RNC in 2012.
Hi, I'm Joe Hunter. I'm the chair in Utah, although I'm a native of Missouri. And I began my career in politics as a barely paid gopher on the Senate campaign of a guy named Jack Danforth. I then went on to spend about 15 years on Capitol Hill here in DC and did stints in both the Reagan and Bush administrations, Bush 41. And in more recent years, like RJ Lyman, I've been working with Governor Bill Weld. And I'm just really grateful to be here with this group.
Why don't you hand the microphone to Gary, then I'll hand this one to Greg, and that'll cover our state chair. Oh, I can't. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Gary Sass. I'm the chair of the Rhode Island Republican Legacy. I served as Director of Administration and Revenue in various Republican administrations in Tennessee. I had a leadership role in the Rubio campaign. And when that imploded, I was asked to do work with John Kasich, who was a Kasich delegate to the 2016 convention. And people in Rhode Island think there are two progressive parties: the populist Trump Progressive Party, the right, and the Progressive Party, the extreme left. And what the people are looking for, and hope we can deliver it, is just basic common sense in governing this country.
Okay. Let's send this down to Greg.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Wilson. I serve as a senior advisor in the Florida state chair for the moment of our Republican legacy, and proud to be part of the leadership team to set this off. I grew up in the state of Ohio, worked for 2 Republican congressmen on the policy side of things, eventually became the Republican staff director of the House Banking Committee, then joined the Reagan and Bush 41 administrations at the U.S. Treasury Department as a political appointee, was active last year in Republicans for Harris, and once again, proud to be part of this team.
Okay. Svea, come take the microphone. So a number of our chairs could not be here today. One I know is watching, but he says his internet connection isn't very good. It's Michael Broadcorp, the chair of Minnesota, who's the former deputy chairman of the Minnesota Republican Party. There's a number of others on Zoom. Matt, can we see if, so any state chairs on Zoom, if you'd like to come in and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Bill McKillick, and I'm from Colorado. I'm a Reagan Republican. I come from a corporate America background. I had a 37-year career in the IT industry, but I've always been very interested in the Republican Party and have participated in it over the years. I'm really looking forward to working with each of you. I echo some of the sentiments that have been stated here and feel the same way.
Great. I see the famous, fearless Tracy Mangold from Wisconsin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Mangold from Wisconsin. I'm the Wisconsin chair for Our Republican Legacy, and I'm extremely happy and honored to be a part of this group. I've been involved for nearly 40 years in the Republican Party of Wisconsin. I was a former 8th District Secretary up until last year when I resigned. As you may have known, I've been saying this, Turning Point has been infiltrating the Republican Party here in the state, and it has caused a lot of strife. People are quitting. We need to have something to step in when the time comes to rebuild the party that it used to be and make it what it should be. So I am so grateful to be part of this, and I wish I could be there with you all, but thank you for including me in this.
Bet. And I see from North Carolina, former Justice Bob Orr.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Bob Orr. I'm a retired Supreme Court Justice here in North Carolina, and I've worked for and in the Republican Party for 45 to 50 years. Where we are today is sad. There's no other way I can describe it. But thanks to Chris and the leadership on this team and Senator Danforth, we're all hoping that the legacy of the Republican Party is, rises up in the years to come.
Great. Are there any more chairs out there that we've missed so far? The only other person I know of who's not here is Amos Rothstein, who's the former executive director of the Idaho Republican Party. So we're really excited to have him on board. If there's no other state chairs, then I'm going to introduce a true hero, a great friend of mine. Michael Steele was the chairman of the Maryland Republican Party when I was the chairman of the Washington Republican Party. So we served together on the Republican National Committee. He went on to be RNC chairman. He's the former lieutenant governor of Maryland, now on MSNBC, and great friend to this movement. Michael?
Oh, good morning, afternoon, evening. Cover all the bases. This is what we do. We cover all the bases. Thank you all very, very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. To those in the room, to those on Zoom, thank you for your time. Senator Danforth, I remember my days working with him early in my political career, coming out of Washington, D.C., where I was born and raised, and watching leaders emerge on the national stage in a way that was profoundly important for the country and profoundly important for the party. And one of the things that I think is important not to lose sight of, and in the idea of why this moment, this movement right now, one word comes to mind, and it is in the three words that describe this effort: legacy. It is about legacy in so many ways. So for me, in a particular way, in a life that I've spent advancing conservative principles over the many years, I've had the privilege to serve as a Prince George's County chairman, as a Republican Party state chairman, as the lieutenant governor of my state, as a chairman of the Republican National Committee. So I'll be damned if anyone's going to question my bona fides. Period. That just doesn't work. I'm sorry. It just doesn't. So the first part of legacy is owning it. So y'all just need to stop letting them trample over that legacy with their stuff, taking away from you the power that comes from the legacy you've helped create. Not for you personally, but for the party in your local jurisdiction, in your state, and certainly for the country. That's what this is about. That knot in your stomach is recognizing just how raw and wrong all of this is, because it eats at the core of legacy. It eats at the core of what we are hoping to build up for the next generation of Republicans. See this young man sitting here right now. That's what this is about. What are we handing on? We handing on tariffs and locking up people indiscriminately and a runaway executive? No, that's not what the founders had in mind. That's what they tried to guard against. That was the legacy they handed to us to protect. And so we need to do a better job of that. I remember when I was asked to assume the chairmanship of the RNC on the heels of what was two awful losses in 2006, 2008. I was on the ballot in 2006, so I can tell you, my buddy Bill, Bill, you remember, right? Back in the day in 2006, what that was like, to go through that election cycle with the country mad at you. And then again in 2008, in the McCain effort, again, the country, and I think you put it right, where, it's the candidates and the messaging and all of that kind of matters. And it's a hard soup to kind of develop. But guys like Bill Kristol and others who are inside an administration trying to create the narration, and those of us outside trying to carry that message to the people, that dynamic is a very delicate balance. And when it's out of whack, the public will respond. And they respond in a way in which they clock you upside the head. You don't win the election. You don't establish that relationship that is so important. And so for me, I saw the opportunity coming in as RNC chairman as an opportunity to define our principles in a new way and to take a risk that the party up to that point I thought was not really prepared to do, in some cases not interested in doing, to push back on a 20th century mindset that refused to recognize the need for a 21st century party. So in short, the party, I think for it to survive, it was time to turn the elephant to face its future. And I don't know about you, but it does matter which end of the elephant you start with when you go to turn it. That's the work. So here we find ourselves gathering in the shadow of a once proud Republican Party, now deformed by this era of republicanism. But I think our truth, remains that Republicans that have lost their voice on things that have mattered to the American people, and they've done so for a long time now. This is not anything new. This has been something that has been in the works for a while. And it has grown to the point that our credibility with the American people has snapped completely. And more Americans view the party as less relevant to their everyday life. Having that voice that's going to be in state capitals and legislatures, in town halls and in community meetings that speak to the concerns of the people. To make matters worse, what many inside and outside the party failed to understand was it wasn't the fault of our principles, but rather the failure of our leadership to honor those principles. Consequently, over time, our principles have morphed into baser motives. We became more interested in red versus blue, that was egged on by feckless Republican leadership, politicians, know-it-alls. The net result, of course, has been the diminishment of that Lincoln legacy, the diminishment of that Eisenhower legacy, the diminishment of that Reagan legacy. the diminishment of your legacy as leaders within the party, even if you did not hold a title. The fact that you were in the room, the fact that you were able to bring someone to the table, the fact that you were able to move the storyline, the narrative, to tell the story of our principles. It should be no secret to Republicans by now that the country has changed and continues to do so. And so most Americans today see a Republican Party that defines itself by what it is against, right? Rather than what it's for. And when it does state what it is for, well, that's not a good day for immigrants. That's not a good day for LGBTQ. That's not a good day for African Americans and people of color. It's not a good day for women. A 21st century GOP must reconnect with its radical past, affirming individual liberty while focusing, for example, on the importance of the economy, the importance of opportunity, the importance of civil rights, the importance of the rule of law, and the importance of the environment. During my last months as RNC chairman, I warned the party that we stood on the precipice of republicanism, ready to throw each other off because some wanted a litmus test of the party and others wanted a party to be made in their own image. Problem is that party excludes and narrowly defines the American story and strips away the core, the beauty, the essence of legacy. I know that new voices that are consistent with this radical idea, the radical nature of our party formed in 1854, is ready to give rise to something fresh, is ready to give rise to something important. Reimagining the Republican Party involves considering how it might adapt to contemporary political, social, and economic landscapes while maintaining its core principles. Not asking anyone to give up anything. We're actually asking you to lean into it, to embrace it, to make it a part of the story you now begin to tell. Because in the face of everything that's out there, that's antithetical to the very values of this country and the very values and principles of this party, when you raise your voice, clarity, that's a light. That's the light Reagan talked about in that city on a hill. It's how we hold on and show that legacy and how we hold on and tell that truth and how we relate it to people. We need to stop being selfish with that legacy and understand the importance of sharing it. A reimagined Republican Party will strive to balance traditional conservative values with forward-looking policies that address contemporary challenges, that promote a vision that resonates with a broader and more diverse electorate. Folks, you're not changing the composition of this country no matter what kind of wall you build or how many people you think you can drag out of here. The country is still going to change. And so you either help with that change by inculcating, infusing these Republican values in that change, or you just get left behind. Because the change is not coming, it's here. A new philosophical narrative for the Republican Party must center around empowered conservatism, which integrates traditional conservative values with a modern, inclusive, and forward-thinking approach. At its core, we must build empowered conservatism on the belief that a free and prosperous society is best achieved through the empowerment of individuals and communities, responsible governance, and a commitment to justice and innovation. It will emphasize the importance of adapting conservative principles to meet the challenges of this age and future ages, fostering a political environment that is inclusive, dynamic, and forward-looking. So here we are. We're here because we are aligned with our fellow Republicans around legacy. That's why we're here. And we're trying to provide and will provide a unifying vision for a reimagined Republican Party that attracts a broader coalition of voters and addresses the diverse needs and aspirations of the American people. That's something I believe, and I think you do too, that Abraham Lincoln would be proud of. Thank you.
I love Michael Steele. So I'm going to, Matt, there's a state chair we missed. Can we quickly go back to Zoom and then we have a couple of PowerPoint presentations? Is that okay?
Yeah, 1 second.
Let me introduce to you guys Matt Lund, our communications director. He's awesome. He makes all this possible. All the pressure's on him today.
Okay.
Stephen Willing from California. You're up.
Oh, we can't hear him.
Yeah. Stephen, you're on mute.
He's not muted.
Can we? No?
No, can't hear him.
Stephen, we can't hear you for some reason. So Stephen's our newest state chair. He's the only person who understands my life traveling from the West Coast. He is a former electronics executive and Republican activist, and we're thrilled to have him. So now we'll switch over to a couple PowerPoint presentations.
Yep.
So we've had some really inspiring remarks this morning. Now we're going to get down into more of the nuts and bolts about what are we doing? Why are we here? What is going on with this new organization? And we're standing by for a moment. Okay. So what exactly is our Republican legacy? So our Republican legacy is not new. It's not being founded today. It was founded almost exactly a year ago at this time by Senator Danforth, Senator William Cohen, and late Senator Alan Simpson. And if you look on our webpage, 34 other very distinguished Republican leaders, most of whom were former members of the House, but also former Vice President Quayle, former Speaker John Boehner, and ORL was founded roughly a year ago, kind of in the middle of the election campaign. And in the beginning, Senator Danforth and the other founders made it very clear what this organization is, because there's a lot of organizations out there and doing different missions, and we're going to hear from some of them later today. ORL is Republicans who are not willing to leave the party, want to stand and fight for the party, or as he said, a catalyst for a movement to reassert traditional republicanism against the populist version it has become under Donald Trump. And they put out some excellent messaging, open letters to the Republican National Committee, to the members of Congress, and ORL was active last summer. Now, times are even different and the problem's even greater. Faced with everything we're seeing happening at the beginning of the Trump administration, Senator Danforth and the leadership are putting renewed emphasis into the organization in a couple specific ways. One, more messaging, more often on more platforms. If you've been following us, you may have noticed that our online presence has exponentially expanded in the past few months with almost daily messaging, taking positions on issues, and being as loud as we can be. Today is a good example. And this is just the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. We're just getting started. And second, becoming more of a mobilizing organization. There is, we know, a huge community out there of us, of conservatives and Republicans who do not like the direction the party's taking, where the country's going. They have not had a unifying organization designed to fight back within the party. And we want to gather those folks under our banner through this national committee we are building. So, what is our Republican legacy? Why are we here? Our mission is to advocate for the return of the Republican Party to traditional conservative principles, which have been talked about extensively today, our 5 core principles. And we're going to do that in 2 ways. One, messaging. Putting out our message every day as loud as we can, in as many places as we possibly can. And second, by building the 50-state grassroots organization so these state chairs can go home and be a force multiplier and build an organization and take the message there. We are, in effect, the Republican Party in exile. I want you to think about that for a second. A lot of us are very motivated by a great article that was in the New York Times early in the 2024 cycle by Peter Wehner, talking about what Republicans needed to do is create a Republican Party in exile. I encourage you to read that. It lays out in great detail what we want to achieve and the philosophy we have. I think of it, and everybody, all my colleagues know I love this metaphor, we are like the French Resistance, okay? In 1941. We are a handful of guys in the woods with a couple pistols and a couple hand grenades, okay? We're small, but we're feisty, and we're going to grow, and we're going to fight. That's what ORL is about. Now, what are we not? This is important to understand what ORL is not, because we get a lot of questions about this. Very important for state chairs, okay? We are not a PAC. We cannot endorse candidates. We will not be making donations to candidates. Maybe someday we'll add a PAC to this organization, but as of now, we are a 501c4 advocacy organization. We cannot say the magic words, elect, defeat, things like that. I've already been asked, well, are you going to try and elect some moderate Democrats? We're not going to try and elect anybody specifically, okay? It's not that. Are you endorsing so-and-so? Well, we can't. We're not a PAC. Our job, and we can still be very active in the political space, believe me, by just constantly advocating for Republicans to adhere to Republican values. That's our mission. Second, we're not a think tank. People, well, you're going to take a position on this, you're going to take a position on that. We are taking positions on issues, and we're going to hear about that later today, but we're not trying to create a full-blown party platform. As a former state party chairman, let me tell you, state chairs, national chairs hate platforms. Just a thing for volunteers to cause trouble. We will advocate loudly, but only for the clearly defined core principles that Senator Danforth laid out, because we think they are the unifying principles that are commonly held throughout our party. So that's what ORL is. I'm going to stop and do something on not questions, comments, concerns. We want this to be a meeting for everybody. If anybody, okay. Matt, can you pull up the next one? Building, what does this mean now then? Building the Republican Party in exile. Oops. So we have some missions for you state chairs, both here and on Zoom. And a lot of it comes from, and in the loose leadership structure we've created, I'm the senior advisor working on building and working with the national committee. And we have a few things we'd like you to work on. Some of them are modeled on the things that I'm trying to do already in my state. But first, y'all need to help me find more great state chairs. Okay, we have 15. That's fantastic. Some of them came over from the Republicans for Harris movement and are experienced working in this space, but we need more. So think about who around the country, and everybody listening on Zoom or on social media, if you'd like to be a state chairman, you know of somebody who would be a good state chairman, email us at info@ourrepublicanlegacy.com. That'll come to me, and I'll take a good look at it. But we need more state chairs. So give some thought to that. Where can we find more good state chairs? Second, in your states, think about who are the Republicans, former Republicans, conservative independents, who feel the same way we do, who are not happy with how things are going in the Republican Party. Reach out to them, call them, email them. You know who they are probably. You know, maybe folks who've written letters to the editor or spoken up or left the party or anything. Get a hold of them and ask them to join you. And when you get them, this is critical, ask them to go to our website and register, sign the form. So we have their email address, their zip code, their cell phone. You know, you're not on board until you register. Then we can use those names. And one thing we're going to be doing as we gather more names, and that's one thing Matt's going to do with the magic of digital technology, we're going to now, after this launch, work very hard at building the biggest list we possibly can of people around the country. We already have a decent sized list now. We want it to be much, much bigger. And as we get names of people who signed up for ORL, we will give them to you state chairs for you to mobilize. If I send you 25 people who sign up, I want you to call them all or email them all or text them all and ask them to join and let them know what you're doing and that sort of thing. So first job for us and everyone else, recruit new members. And again, if you want to join us, info@ourrepublicanlegacy.com, or just go to the website, ourrepublicanlegacy.com, click join us and sign in. Sign the form. Next, amplify our message, okay, on social media and local media. Frankly, I'm a little grumpy with all of you all right now. And here's why. Some of you have been state chairs for a month or two. I haven't seen anybody like or share any of our posts. You know, some of us of a certain generation, you know, social media is not a toy anymore. It is an incredibly powerful way to do our message. I want you guys every morning to go on the ORL Twitter page, Blue Sky page, Facebook page. We haven't done Instagram for several days, Matt. We need to go there and like and share it and comment on it. That is a huge ability to quickly share messaging for free. Okay, so I want to start seeing all the state chairs and everyone else go to our social media pages and like our message. The next thing, reach out to your local media. Announce you are the state chair. We will help you with that if you need help. That you're doing things, you're getting active. Tell them about this meeting. I hope you all used to stay. Take pictures, put on your social media, distribute that to your local media. Try and get a guest editorial placed. The Seattle Times was kind enough to run a guest editorial for me last week. You can all do the same. Lynn particularly. Lynn's a columnist for the St. Louis paper. I today took the press release that we sent out today, and we should make that available to everybody. Remind me, Matt. And I forwarded it to all the political media in the Seattle market. Those simple things are force multipliers. Again, I like that phrase. So state chairs, get out there and get active on social media and with your local media. Okay. When you do stuff, we will help you and we will amplify it. Tell me that you've done this sort of stuff and it'll go up on our pages back and forth. Okay. Do something. Have some sort of event, live or online. During the Republicans for Harris campaign, we would just have kind of like Zoom rallies of Republicans for Harris and gather people. Start thinking about, could you put together 20, 30, 40 people, a booth this summer at a Republican event or a county fair, handing out literature, and we're going to have that soon. Do something live or online, and if you have something that is particularly attractive, I will work to get one of our great ORL speakers to come online, especially if it's on Zoom. Congressman Dent, Congressman Comstock, or it could be and others. We can get guest speakers for you, but you got to go out and schedule these things. And as I said, we are going to soon be doing, again, what Republicans for Harris did. We're going to be developing ORL handouts and like ORL signs that you can print, so print on demand to use in your local state. So amplify our message on social media and out there in the community. And anybody want to interrupt me, do so. Looking around. You're also compliant. I like it. This one's kind of touchy. Where possible, engage with the state and local GOP. Now, believe me, I understand. I think every state chair who I've talked to has said, you don't understand how much they hate me. Oh, you think I don't understand? Again, they elected me state chairman 3 times, and now I am persona non grata. Matt will tell you. And we've all gone through that. Well, too bad. They don't own the party. The Republican Party is for everybody who wants to participate. So where possible, engage. We're not looking for confrontation. We don't want fights. Okay, but we want Republicans, even current Republicans, to know that there's an alternative to MAGA. So a couple things I'm going to try and do. There are 2 conferences that are for Republicans in my state that are open to the public, one this summer and one in the winter. It's probably too late for me to attend the one that's coming up, I think, next week. But I'm going to start going to these things and ask to speak and maybe have a table and hand out stuff and just be a pest and let them know we're here. I'm sure, I mean, we have this thing in Washington State called the Roanoke Conference, where it's a weekend where a whole lot of Republican activists come. It's at Ocean Shores, and they party and listen to Republican rhetoric. I mean, there are other things around the country. Anybody else have something like that? Think about that. You know, we need to participate in those things. If it's possible and feasible, run for party office again. In my state, we elect people called precinct committee officers, very local. I think it's like 250 voters in a precinct. If you're elected as a precinct committee officer, you are now a member of the county central committee. You can go to the county meetings and make motions and cause trouble and be loud, you know, and let them know that you are there. You also, at least in my state, if you are a precinct committee officer, you're an automatic delegate to the county convention, where you can compete to be a delegate to the state convention. Get back in the process. That's one of the ways we have to take this party back, is from the inside. Okay? I'm going to run for precinct committee officer in 2026. That ought to be interesting, but I'm going to try. Look for opportunities on social media or anywhere else to engage in respectful debate, if you can. You know, oh, geez, you know, and what I try and do on my own personal social media is not tell them tariffs are bad, mostly, but just tell them that Republicans never supported them in the past. So, guys, if you think that I'm a rhino, really, then you're telling me that the entire Republican Party pre-Trump was rhinos. And hardcore MAGA people know that, and they think we are. I mean, the hardcore MAGA people get it. They have purposely tried to drive us out of the party, and they really don't like us. But they're, as you're going to hear later from our friend Whit Ayers, they're not the entire party. And average Republicans out there who are just kind of going along with what's happening need to understand that what is being shoved at them is not traditional Republican philosophy, historical Republican philosophy. I mean, I love to point, this causes their heads to explode. Ronald Reagan supported an assault weapons ban. I'm not sure I agree with him about that, but I mean, so wherever you can, try and have some sort of debate, if you can, gently with them. And again, all of this is dependent on what's happening in your state, because every state's different. Every state's structured differently. But these are just some ideas. This is the big one. So folks, people, I mean, you want to take hope, understand this basic fact. Donald Trump's name will never be on a ballot again. Okay? It is easy to be despondent at what we see in front of us right now. But I've been doing this for 40 years, and there's always another election. No, he cannot. There's always another election. That's the political gravity, whether you like it or not. There's going to be another election, and Donald Trump will not be the Republican nominee. In fact, in less than 2 years, he's going to be a lame duck, as 6, 8, 10, God knows how many Republicans will be out there running for president. The focus will shift away from him. For the first time since May of 2016, we can see the day just over the horizon where he will not be the all-powerful, unchallenged, unbeatable leader of the Republican Party. That changes everything. I'm not saying that it's a guarantee that we're going to win, but it's a guarantee that we have a chance. There was no one who's going to beat Donald Trump in 2020 or 2024. That is not going to be the case in 2028. So we need to get ready for that fight now. How? Well, think. Just think ahead. How does the process work in your state? Every state's different. In my state, they've traditionally allocated some of the national convention delegates by the primary and some by the caucus and convention system. Every state is different. Think ahead. How can we influence that process? For I don't know who. I don't know who yet. No one does. There's almost certainly, however, going to be somebody, or maybe several people from our wing of the party running for president. How do we help them? And every state matters. Okay? I come from Washington State. There is zero chance that a Republican is going to win Washington State. But Washington State will send 45 delegates to the National Convention, and that's what matters. So the election that I'm thinking about is going to be the presidential primary in my state. We need to build an infrastructure now, doing the things I've talked about, to prepare for what Senator Danforth has called the inevitable conflict to come, because it's coming. Okay? There's going to be a war for the soul of the Republican Party and the conservative movement, starting in not less than 2 years. And you know what? Same thing's going to happen on the Democratic side, especially if Vice President Harris doesn't run again. That thing is wide open. I should do the research. When is the last time you had the Democratic Party with no obvious nominee, no sitting vice president, no former vice president? Well, that's what you're going to have if Harris decides to be governor of California instead. So think and plan, build, and get ready for 28. Okay? Next steps. Next steps. I have gotten in the habit of sending all you state chairs an email every Monday. That will continue. Okay? We will start holding regular state chair Zoom calls. I'm thinking monthly. What do y'all think? Now, come on, interact. Monthly? Every 2 weeks? Monthly? I'm saying. RJ says monthly, and RJ's always in charge. Monthly? Okay, monthly. Monthly state chair calls to keep in touch. I would like us to host occasional Zoom calls for the entire National Committee. And the National Committee is sort of undefined. I take it as everybody who supports this organization, not just state chairs. So y'all for being here, you're members of the National Committee. Congratulations. And I think we should host, every once in a while, a big Zoom call for everybody who wants to participate with our ORL speakers, get Senator Danforth on the line again. And we haven't even talked about this, but, in person is great. Maybe once a year or something, we need to have something that looks like a convention, maybe, with everybody together in person. Maybe when we get closer to 50 state chairs, something like that. So we're going to be gathering and keeping in touch. As I said, we're going to be creating handouts and not yard signs so much as placards for use for you at home. We will feed you names of supporters from your state as we get them. Okay? But most importantly, I'm doing my job and Matt's doing, you people have to go home and make noise. Make noise. Lynn, you had lunch with Senator Danforth recently. What did he tell us to be? Be a pest. Get out there and let the world know that we're doing this. It's no one's going to say it's going to be easy, but it has to be done. America must have if we're going to have a two-party system, one of those two parties cannot continue to be a dangerous neo-fascist mob. We've got to fight to redeem the Republican Party, and it starts now. Okay? Questions, comments, concerns? Well, with that, what we have next is a short break. We think we're a little ahead of schedule. A little ahead of schedule, just barely. Why don't we how about 10 minutes? People go to the restroom, get a cookie, get some coffee. Is that okay? Something like that? 10 minutes? Okay, 10 minutes.
Taking a break.
Sorry. I'm Greg Wilson. We didn't meet. Follow you. I want to hear more about what you're doing, but we're glad you're here. Yes. Greg Wilson. Are you really?
I thought red was loud.
There's a guy I lived in the city of Beverly for 20 years. Guy native to the went to the city council.
I have it. Okay. You got a while. Restroom back. I got to use that. I do know where it is. Watching on Facebook. Yeah. His job is to manage the press and media relations with that nonprofit. Okay. He said, I'll work that. Love that. Yeah, me too. He said he's happy to help. Love that. Okay, great. Thank you. I don't know if we need to do anything. Got everything done? Good.
We're gonna, can you get it up on Zoom so I can see, let the former members if they're. I need a gavel.
Oh, no. Take cares are going to have their first little caucus.
Okay, we're getting seated again, and then there are 3 to 5 former members of Congress who were joining us by Zoom. Some of whom I think would like to say a few words. Just a moment here. Oh, there you go. Are those the folks that are on right now? Can you go back to that list of the panelists that are on? I don't see any of the former members right now. Okay, well, they were on earlier, so let's just try this. Can they hear me? All right, thanks for coming back in. There were at least four former members of Congress who were founding members of ORL who are joining us by Zoom, and we'd like to give them a chance to speak if they're there. I'm looking for former Representative Bob Inglis or former Representative Chris Shays. He said he was probably driving, so I couldn't. Former Representative Steve Bartlett. I think those are well, if we miss them, but I saw them earlier on Zoom, so they've been here and they've been active again. There's, like I said, if you look on the website, there's 34 names there, and a lot of them are very helpful to us and are helpful. And again, Charlie Dent and Barbara Comstock would have both been here today, but they're in Europe. Oh, darn, for them. But somebody who has joined us, who is a huge friend to this movement, Bill Kristol is been kind enough to come here today. I think Bill Kristol's an absolute hero because in the darkest days, right after Trump, he more than anybody rallied what was left of the Never Trump movement and mobilized us, and has been active in all the efforts ever since. He shows up at all these events, Principles First and everything. He's just a great voice for us. And Bill, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Chris. It's great to be with you. I really here, as I told Chris when he said, I might ask you to say a few words. I said, well, I'm just a fellow traveler. I am really not quite where you guys are, I think, in terms of I'm very much for saving the Republican Party or restoring a healthy Republican Party. It's absolutely essential to our country's well-being. It's good in its own right, obviously, too. It's a legacy to be proud of, as Senator Danforth said. I spent a lot of 2017 through early 2020 refusing to give up on the Republican Party because I did think I wasn't terribly hopeful about stopping President Trump from being renominated in 2020. Wasn't that hopeful about stopping Trumpists from winning these primaries, even at the state and local level. But I thought worth even taking a long shot to have two healthy parties in this country. It really is. Political scientists have studied this. It is the precondition of a healthy democracy. And conversely, having one of your two major parties, when it controls half the elected controls, when it gets the votes of half the electorate, is a precondition for not having a very healthy democracy, as we unfortunately are seeing today. If the rule of law depends every 4 years on a swing of 2 percentage points in the election in the electorate, we're not in very good shape, and that's where we are now. So I very much applaud what you're doing. I myself, I think everyone needs to try what they think is right, do what they think is right, focus their energies where they think they can be most useful. As Chris was saying, it's a big country, different states are in different situations. We each have different backgrounds and different strengths and different weaknesses and different things we can bring to the table. So I'm very much against telling everyone you all should do this or you should all do that. Some people should try to save the Republican Party or start a better one at the state and local level and ultimately at the national level. I live in Virginia. I'm perfectly happy to work for and vote for Abigail Spanberger this fall for governor. It's not a close call for me. There's no Republican alternative to the extremely Trumpy lieutenant governor who's the gubernatorial nominee. I'm perfectly happy, honestly, to have voted for Mark Warner and Tom Kaine, who were perfectly reasonable, mostly perfectly reasonable Democrats, and who were running against less reasonable Republicans, who won their primaries pretty easily. So for me, I think I'm more on the let's help the Democratic Party side of things. Let's help the Democratic Party be sane and sensible and responsible side of things. But I very much salute those of you who can make a difference in the Republican Party. And I voted for Nikki Haley in 2024 in just across the river in North Virginia, hoping that might send a signal too. So luckily we don't have party registration in Virginia, so I can honestly tell people I'm not really in any party, and it's very easy. You just request whichever ballot you want. There's not even a change of party situation in terms of voting in the primaries. So I could vote Democratic primaries for the moderate Democrat, and then if there's a Nikki Haley type, or better, honestly, better than Nikki Haley type, and the Republican side, I can vote for him or her. I think the other thing I was thinking, I've talked about this with some of my friends who really are more kind of attached to making the effort on the Republican side, which, as I say, I respect. I think partly one thing that's influenced me is that unlike many people, I think, whom we've heard of today, I didn't start out actually as a Republican. Maybe because I grew up in New York City and there were no Republicans, so it would have been a pretty weird thing to start out as, honestly, on the west side of Manhattan in the '60s. But the people I volunteered for as a kid, and I mean this was literally in high school and stuff, and nothing serious, but handing out leaflets like we used to do in the old days, were for Hubert Humphrey in '68, and then when I was in college for Scoop Jackson when he was running for president from Washington in 1972, and then my first real job on a campaign was the summer of '76, where I worked for Pat Moynihan in the Democratic primary against Bella Abzug, which he won by 1 point, amazingly, against extremely far left. People say, "Oh, the Democratic Party is really going left." I say, you should see Bella Abzug. You may not like AOC, but Bella Abzug attended Stalinist party conferences this is true, in Prague, like in 1952. I mean, they were literally kind of communist front, conferences. We've discovered this in our research, opera research back in those days, pouring through New York Times microfiche, films. And Pat barely beat Abzug actually in the primary. And then by 1980, I was a Reagan Republican, and basically was that for the next 25, Reagan Bush McCain Republican for the next quarter century or so. So I have a little more, honestly, I think for me, becoming a voting Democratic or showing up at a Democratic event is a little less of a culture shock, maybe, than for people who, have been Republicans since their teenage years. And I do, honestly, to be fair, we talk about our Republican legacy. There was a Democratic legacy too, right? That was honorable, from Truman and through Humphrey and Jackson and others, and it had elements down to the present day. And I think actually it's an interesting question whether how strong or weak it is in the Democratic Party today. I would make the case that it's a little stronger than people think, that the left is actually a little weaker. We'll see what happens in different primaries and obviously, ultimately in the presidential race in 28, but that's at least my view. But anyway, I could fail in efforts to make the Democratic Party responsible. I could succeed. It's still very important that you all succeed in helping make the Republican Party responsible once again. It's a bigger task, honestly, but a very important one. Chris mentioned you think of yourself as the French resistance in World War II. I was thinking about that metaphor, whatever it is, analogy, and I guess I think of myself as, in a very tiny way, obviously a very small way, advising the British and the American forces that they don't go off script, so to speak, and that they do decide they should liberate Europe in 1944. You can't say this in France, actually, but the French resistance did not by itself topple the Nazi regime. I mean, I don't know, they were, I think, speaking English like when they went ashore on D-Day, So I think we all have, but I say this sort of seriously, we all have a role to play. I remember in 2019 when I was hanging in there as a Republican, I met Pete Buttigieg. I'd met him once or twice before, but I didn't know him well at all. And we were both I remember it's still actually funny, there's this Texas Tribune Festival in Austin each year. So fall, I guess, of 2019, he was running for president, but he was mixing and mingling and cultivating journalists. And, we each knew who the other was, and we had a very pleasant chat. And he said, "What do you consider yourself these days?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure. Virginia doesn't have party registration." So that was my way of ducking it. I said, well, you're not quite a Democrat. I said, no, though I certainly expect to vote for a Democrat in 2020. It'd be nice if they nominated someone like you or Joe Biden or Bloomberg at the time was going to run, as opposed to Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. And he agreed with that. He more agreed if it was going to be him, especially. But and he looked at me, and he's a pretty witty guy actually, and clever. He said, Bill, I think you're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat yet, but you're a future former Republican. So I said, you're a former Republican, but you're soon going to be a future former Republican, and have crossed the aisle, so to speak. And he's used this phrase. I don't think it was the first time he'd used it with me, but he's used it a lot publicly. And you all may turn out to be future former Republicans or not, or I may turn out to be a future former Republican and come back. I do honestly. I'll just close with this. I mean, I think honestly, we don't know. Be crazy after the last 10 years to think that we can predict where American politics is going to be in the next 3 years from now. We could be enthusiastically behind a Democratic candidate. We could be enthusiastically behind a Republican candidate. We could be sort of semi-unhappily behind one or the other. We could be I think some of us could be in an independent or a third party effort. We could be deciding that we can be a faction who can influence both parties, which is something I think to think about. If you look at American history, the progressives, extremely important in American history. There were Republican progressives and Democratic progressives for a long time, I mean, for 20, 25 years. And it wasn't like they ever quite picked one party. They had strengths in both parties in different states, different regions, some focused on different issues. And they changed an awful lot about American politics between about 1890, let's say, and 1920. And so one can be a faction that overlaps the parties, and does different things in different years, and as Chris has been saying, in different parts of the country. But I admire what you're doing. I'm supportive of what you're doing. I think again, I think keeping flexible is would be my only advice. Don't dig yourself into your own. You mentioned earlier political gravity. I mean, there is reality ultimately. Don't dig yourself into your own narrative. I shouldn't dig myself into my own narrative either. And when the Democratic ticket is, God knows what, in 2028, and AOC will be the more right-wing part of the ticket, and who knows? I'll be showing up at your gatherings as an enthusiastic participant, and vice versa. Keep an open mind yourselves. But I mean, we all need to be somewhat, I think, flexible. Honestly, it's hard to do both at once, right? Be flexible but also committed. And I think that is the task we face over the next few years. Anyway, good luck, and it's great to have been here. And I'm going to stay a little bit while, and then I'm going to duck out and do one or two things. But and for those of you not from Washington, I should say welcome to the Washington area. And anyway, it's really been good seeing you, and it's cheered me up. It's given me a little boost for the day. So thank you for that.
That's why we're here, to cheer people up. That's good. So let's get Whit's video ready. So we are now. Bill's right. You can't ever predict what's going to happen in politics. Other than what I said, there's going to be another election, and Donald Trump won't be the nominee. That we know for sure. Everything else, we work for. But there's somebody now going to speak to us who's going to talk about where things stand today and where they might go. Whit Ayers is the owner of North Star Opinion Research, one of the best pollsters out there on the Republican side, who's still part of us. And Whit is a hero. He is a brave man. He had knee surgery today. So he recorded a video for us. It's about 13 minutes long, about where polling stands today and his analysis of it. And then he is on Zoom to take questions if the drugs allow him to. But Matt, are we ready? Yeah. Okay. We need Whit's video.
Hello, everyone. I'm Whit Ayers, president of North Star Opinion Research. Chris Vance asked if I would give a brief overview of public opinion about the Trump presidency and what comes next, and I'm happy to do so. I'm happy to do anything that could resurrect a real Republican Party. So, how did Trump win? Trump won because of the historic unpopularity of the Biden-Harris administration. No administration with a job approval below 47% has ever won re-election in the last 40 years, and Harris was effectively running for Biden's second term. Joe Biden's stubborn refusal to get out of the way and allow a younger and more popular Democratic nominee who was not connected to his administration really doomed the Democrats. The loss is far more on him than it is on Kamala Harris. Trump won because of 4 issues: inflation, economy, immigration, and culture. Voters thought the pre-pandemic Trump economy was better than the economy under Biden and Harris because it was for most voters. Inflation was far lower in the pre-pandemic Trump economy. Mortgage rates were less than half of what they were during Biden's time. Gas prices were $1 less, and groceries cost $100 in 2019, but $125 in 2024. And while inflation moderated during the latter part of Biden's term, it didn't go backwards. And those $125 groceries were still going to cost $125. Our firm did a number of statewide surveys in swing states during 2024. And going back and looking at the data, it was clear that the best predictor of Trump's vote in the 7 swing states was the percent of voters who said they were better off when Trump was president. In Georgia, 51% said they were better off as president. He got 52% in the election. Nevada was 51% better off, 51% in the election. Wisconsin was 50 and 50. The similarity in those numbers is really uncanny. Trump also gained a real advantage on cultural issues. Voters in the 7 swing states overwhelmingly opposed biological males who identify as females competing in women's sports. This is a result of a survey we did of the battleground states at the end of July, the start of August. So, how is Trump doing at the start of his second term? Trump started his second term with the lowest job approval of any president in the last 64 years, except for Trump in his first term. He started off in his second term at about 47% compared to 44% in his first term, and he has gone down since then. This is a collection of averages that the Cook Political Report put together that shows that Trump's job approval is now down to about 44% where he started his first term. Strong disapproval of Trump's job performance is now 15 percentage points higher. Americans approve of Donald Trump's effort on border security, to give credit where credit is due. He has basically shut down the southern border, not with physical barriers, but with rhetoric and with a few policy changes. But Americans overwhelmingly approve of many of his other initiatives. On the economy, only 38% approve, 56% disapprove. On tariffs, 33% approve, 58% disapprove. And on inflation, the number one reason he's in the presidency, only 33% approve of his efforts and 59% disapprove. Despite overall support for deporting undocumented immigrants in general, Americans strongly oppose deporting those who aren't criminals, 57% oppose, arrived as children, 70% oppose, and have U.S. citizen children, 66% oppose. Americans think Trump has gone too far on tariffs, on using presidential power, and on reducing the federal workforce. The federal courts are blocking numerous Trump initiatives, and public opinion overwhelmingly believes the administration must follow court orders. This is an interesting survey done by the Pew Research Center in April, where they asked if a federal court rules a Trump administration action illegal, the administration has to follow the court's ruling. 78% does not have to follow the court's ruling, only 19%. They then asked the 19% if it's the Supreme Court that rules a Trump administration action illegal, the administration does not have to follow the court ruling is down to 9%. Overwhelmingly, Americans believe that the administration has to follow a Supreme Court order. Stephen Miller, the Trump aide, is fond of saying that keeping Garcia in the prison in El Salvador is an 80-20 issue. Well, it may be an 80-20 issue, but in the exact opposite way that Stephen Miller argues. As a North Carolina alum, I attribute the deficiencies in his interpretation to his Duke education, but regardless, it's clear that well over 80% of Americans believe that the administration has to follow Supreme Court orders. Populist politicians like Trump are essentially anti. They're anti-immigrant, which is what's driven much of the popularity of populist politicians in Europe. They're anti-expertise, which is one reason why the Trump administration apparently feels comfortable canceling millions of dollars in critical medical research for things like ALS and cancer. They're anti-media, which is why Trump likes calling the media the enemy of the people. They're anti-establishment, which is why Trump is so derisive when he talks about Republicans in name only. They're anti-intellectual, which explains his assault on Harvard University and other elite institutions. And they're anti-global, which explains why Trump is imposing these blanket tariffs on countries around the world, including many of our closest allies. Populist governments are great at destroying things, but they have a hard time creating a positive agenda and building something to replace what they've torn down. In 2016, the people of Great Britain voted to leave the European Union and pass Brexit by a narrow majority. It's only recently, in the last few weeks, that the United Kingdom created an agreement for trade with the European Union to try to recreate what was blown up by Brexit 9 years ago. This chart shows that 55% of the people of Great Britain think it was a mistake to leave the European Union, and only 30% think it was a good thing to leave. It takes a long time to build up institutions and build up trust, and a very short time to tear them down. It takes 100 years to grow a forest and 100 minutes to burn it down. But that's one of the things that populist governments are good at, are blowing things up. But they're very poor at creating something that is positive to replace what they've torn. So what's the current state of the two major parties? Well, the Republican coalition consists of about 35% of people who consider themselves Trump Republicans, but fully 61% who are more mainstream. This comes from a survey we did in March where we asked the people who voted for Trump in 2024, do you consider yourself part of Donald Trump's Make America Great Again movement or the MAGA movement, or did you vote for him mainly because you thought he was a better choice than Kamala Harris? And overwhelmingly, mainstream Republicans still outnumber MAGA Republicans. We've also added to this chart the 5% of Republicans from the exit polls who said they voted for Kamala Harris or for. Current ratings of the Republican Party are lousy, with the majority rating the party negatively, 43% favorable, 56% unfavorable, a net negative of 13 percentage points. But ratings of the Democratic Party are even worse, 38% favorable, 60% unfavorable, a negative 22 points on the net. So what does the future hold? Well, I think some unexpected event is likely to occur because of the wholesale slashing of federal government employees. I don't know if it's going to be a terrorist attack because they've taken people off of monitoring sleeper cells and put them on the border problem. It may be that we have a hurricane that FEMA can't handle because of its funding cuts. It may be that we have a measles epidemic or a resurgence of COVID or polio because we have an anti-vaxxer as our top public health official. It may be a plane crash because we have fewer air traffic controllers. It may be a Social Security meltdown because they fired so many of the top Social Security people who refused to give confidential Social Security data to the Doge boys. I'm not sure what it is, but something tells me that we're going to have an event that's tied back to these massive cuts in the number of federal employees. China has won the first battle of Trump's trade war. Trump basically backed down. And it's stepping in with soft power where the U.S. has pulled back. Soft power matters. The Bush administration's PEPFAR initiative to combat AIDS and malaria in sub-Saharan Africa led to some of the highest favorable ratings of America anywhere in the world. But now that we've pulled back from USAID assistance, the Chinese are stepping in and saying, see, I told you these Americans are hypocritical and would run on you. And now China is filling the void left by America pulling back. I think the Democrat Abigail Spanberger is very likely to waltz into the Virginia governor's office this coming November. You give people in Northern Virginia an opportunity to register disapproval of the Trump administration's agenda, and they're going to come out of the woodwork to vote for Abigail Spanberger. I think Democrats are likely to take over the House in 2026, and if they do, they'll probably impeach Trump yet again. They don't seem to be able to help themselves, and it's not going to do any good, but they probably will do it. It's very hard for me to imagine any other Republican energizing MAGA voters the way Trump has. No one else has his combination of political instincts or ability to command attention and devotion, his entertainment value, and his utter shamelessness. So I don't know that anyone can recreate the existing Trump coalition. In the current circumstances, trying to predict the political environment next week is tough, much less 3.5 years from now. But let me leave you with a quote from the late, great Charles Krauthammer. How I miss him. Politics, the crooked timber of our communal lives, dominates everything because in the end, everything, high and low, and most especially high, lives or dies by politics. You can have the most advanced and efflorescent of cultures. Get your politics wrong, however, and everything stands to be swept away. So that's a quick overview of current public opinion. I'll pass it back to Chris.
And we're going to get Whit up on Zoom. And he's there.
Hello, everybody.
Whit, thank you, by the way. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. Remarkable. Okay. It was fairly minor, fortunately.
I take hope from two things you put in your presentation. One is that only 35% of Republicans are hardcore MAGA. And second, that no one else is going to be able to recreate the Trump coalition. Those two things together make me hopeful going forward, at least to the point to get in this fight. Am I thinking about this the right way?
Oh, you are. You are. I was actually surprised. This was a survey we did for the Bulwark in March, and we asked the people who voted for Donald Trump, do you consider yourself part of the MAGA movement, or did you vote for him just because you didn't like Kamala Harris and you didn't like your choice? It helps us to remember that 70% of Americans did not want a Trump-Biden rematch. 70%. So they really didn't want to vote for either one of these folks. And then when Kamala Harris stepped in, she made it closer, but they didn't want to vote for her either. Some folks blame the voters for where we are. The voters choose between the options presented to them. And an awful lot of people didn't like either one of those options. So it helps to remember that. It was also kind of stunning if you look at the 35% of the Republicans who consider themselves MAGAs, and the 38% of the Democrats who said they thought it was fine for biological males to play in women's sports. That's a remarkably similar number. And it seems like you have the extremes of both parties that are driving the agenda of those parties, where in many ways the tail is wagging the dog. there may be somebody else who can recreate this coalition, but I think Trump is sui generis. He is such a unique combination of skills and talents and phobias and resentments. I can't see JD Vance recreating that or generating the same sort of excitement. Now, I could be proven wrong, but it's hard for me to see anybody else stepping in to Trump's shoes and holding that whole coalition together again.
Good. So we have who has a question or comment or anybody? While he takes the microphone, I want to point out JD Vance is not a real Vance. It's not his real name. It's I think it's his second stepfather's name, and we are not related.
You sure, Chris?
Okay. I am so sure, man.
Sure.
All
So
right.
this is Andy Eastman from Illinois. And
Hey,
my
Andy.
question is, you talked a bit about what a positive Republican message would look like. In the things that you've polled, be they policies, be they, principles that overlap with the ORL principles like rule of law, and granted, this is very difficult in this environment, but what do you see as being sort of a handful of principles or a handful of ideas that a positive Republican, and I'd say presidential, but really any congressional candidate could build upon? What polls well, and where do you think things are heading in that regard?
Well, first of all, I think they're rooted very much in the principles that you have articulated here. I think most Americans don't want Putin to take over Ukraine. I think that most Americans want a free enterprise system that doesn't have the President of the United States determining the prices that you can charge for your goods. I do think the rule of law is more of an elite concern. I mean, the rule of law goes way back 810 years to the Magna Carta in 1215. But the people who crafted our Constitution weren't just a bunch of yeoman farmers. They were some of the brightest, most well-read, most thoughtful people ever to set foot in the same room in any place in the world. And so the idea of protecting things like separation of powers and the rule of law has never been a particular mass concern. It has always been an elite concern, but it is a fundamental building block of a free society where individuals can flourish. So I do think that's one where it is a critically important principle, but it's more of an elite concern. The rest of them, I think you can migrate into a broader message that will appeal to a great many people, but it's got to appeal to people very directly. That's why I think the tariffs raising the prices is a real threat to the Trump administration. And I think that it's got to be something that people feel in their own families and in their own lives in order to move them to vote for somebody.
I see a hand right here. Svea, here comes the microphone.
Hi, Whit.
Hey.
Hey. So I wanted to ask, I know that, countering China is a message that is really working right now,
Yep.
and is something that's broadly popular. But how can we, conceptualize things like defunding PEPFAR and really weakening American soft power in that lens of countering China? Because I think those two things are getting disconnected right now, especially among the public. So I'm not sure how best to do that.
Yeah, I agree with your assertion that it's tough to do. It is very difficult to defend aid to the foreign aid and PEPFAR just because people don't see it as directly related to their lives. It takes a very persuasive and articulate politician to be able to make that connection. And you can say, listen, the terrorists are always looking for fertile ground. PEPFAR prevented them from getting a foothold in many of those countries in Africa because of the appreciation for the United States. But soft power is not something that is readily apparent to most people, but I think a good persuasive politician can make that case. And you're exactly right. People are worried about China. They see China as a giant threat right now, which is why I'm baffled that Trump wouldn't focus his tariffs on China, rally the world against China rather than rally the world against us. But that's why I'm not in the Trump White House, I guess.
Anyone else? Going. Well, then I will. Anybody else? I don't want to be too quick. I'll take the last one then, Whit.
Tracy Ann has her hand up, I
Oh,
think.
Tracy. Okay. I'm sorry. People on Zoom, go ahead.
Yeah, you have some questions in the Zoom chat. There's like 3 questions. My friend who's on there, Deb Kohler, wanted to know your thoughts about Donald Trump Jr. saying that he's possibly gearing up for a run, and she wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know that anyone thinks that Donald Trump Jr. is the equivalent of his father. There are a lot of kids I've seen of governors, of senators who want to follow in their footsteps. It doesn't happen very often. The acorn may not fall far from the trunk of the tree, but it's still not the tree that his father is. So I'd be very surprised if he were the one who could rally that same coalition.
Any others from folks on Zoom? Anybody else? Okay, then Whit, I'm going to take the liberty of the last question. The opposition party always gains seats in the midterm election, except the rare cases where I remember because I was working for him then under George W. Bush, because of the war, we gained seats. And in 1998, because of trying to impeach Bill Clinton, we lost seats. But other than that, the out party always gains seats. The Democrats only need like 5. How do you see 2026? I mean, how big will the Democratic majority be in the House coming out of 26?
Well, as you say, Chris, history suggests that the out party will do well. The Democratic Party is so lost in the wilderness right now. I'm hesitant to make any flat predictions. I mean, if you just look at the various congressional districts that are up, it's almost a coin toss right now. But I do think that history will assert itself eventually, particularly if the Trump administration keeps going the same direction they're going with tariffs and cutting Medicaid. I mean, people don't appreciate how dependent rural hospitals where many, many Trump voters live, how dependent they are on Medicaid. And this big, beautiful bill is going to do a number on a lot of the hospitals where Trump voters live. But if you'd have to guess that the Democrats would probably take over the House. I think the Republicans are very likely to hold on to the Senate based on what we know now, just because of the seats that are up and because of the cushion that they have there. But that's about the best we can do right now, peering into that crystal ball, I think.
Okay. Well, Whit, I've already had questions from people here. They'd like to be able to share this presentation. Do you have any objection to us putting this on your webpage? Because it was excellent.
That'd be fine. I'd be happy to do
Whit,
it.
thank you.
We actually have it, Chris. We've done a slightly revised version that's on the North Star Opinion website, and that should be loaded now. So all you'll have to do is just go there, and you'll get it's almost identical, but a few little tweaks on the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Happy to be with you, and good luck to all of you and your efforts.
Yep. All right. We can applaud. So in addition to the grassroots building that I talked about, one of our other brilliant senior advisors, Greg Wilson and Peter Leibold, the former Chief of Staff to Senator Danforth, are working on another side of this, which is policy development, taking our principles and turning them into specific policy statements. And I will turn it over to Greg for that.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just going to take a few minutes to run through a few slides. I'll do the presentation, and Peter's agreed to take any of the tough questions or comments you have at the end.
Way to do that.
If I can get this to work, there we go. So the leadership team was on a call earlier this week with Senator Danforth, where he just reemphasize the Republican Party that he knew and grew up in, I did, many of you did, that was constructive, it was positive, and it was responsible. And that's what we're trying to get to through the ORL principles, taking them into policy development on issues that affect all of us, whether they're domestic issues or issues of national security and foreign policy, and then translate that into the messaging to distinguish how we are different from the MAGA Republicans and then down the road different from Democrats. Michael Steele, who's still here in the back, you heard him this morning, and we heard it from him on the same call earlier this week, talked about reimagining our principles for this generation. And I think, Michael, when you said this generation, you don't mean people of my age. I'm here, and many of you probably are as well. I'm here in this room today and have been privileged to be part of the leadership team for the past number of months on behalf of my children and grandchildren. That's why I'm here. So the principles are very important. Take us to policy statements. That gets us to the messaging. I'm not going to dwell on the 5 principles. I would encourage you to go to the website if you haven't seen them, review them, and there's a new feature there where you can like them. And so if you can all go there, read the principles, if you agree with them and like them, and then spread the word as part of the advocacy that Chris talked about, that would be great. From this, we developed an initial set of policy issues. You see them here on the right side of this slide. Trump's tariffs. I could go off on a long discourse on this. I won't, other than to say when you read the statement, we were really trying to pin these as Trump's tariffs and get that message across, because left unchecked by either the Supreme Court or the Congress or the bond market or other factors, guarantee you, as a student of history, they will lead to inflation, recession, global trade wars, and we have examples in history of depression, right? No kind of path any of us want to go down to. So tagging him and making clear that we oppose his broad sweep of tariffs as destructive to the economy. We use language, of that caliber. We call on either Trump or Congress to reverse those things and roll them back before we get any further down this path. We'll see if either the executive branch or legislative branch does that. But we're trying to take a principled stand against the tariffs. Same thing with Federal Reserve independence, support for Ukraine. We touched on that a little bit earlier in this day so far. Our position is quite clear. We support Ukraine and our allies. We are opposed to this administration turning and favoring Russia and implicitly supporting continuing Russian aggression in Ukraine. There's a relatively new statement up on the rule of law and what that broadly means. As of just, I think last night, thanks to Matt's good help, there's a new statement on fiscal responsibility framework that takes into consideration the current budget debate going on Capitol Hill. So you want to take a look at that. And then in the pipeline is another one we're developing on support for veterans that flows from our Peace Through Strength principle, which we think is quite important, given the fact that a lot of veterans are being ignored and challenges to the Veterans Administration and other programs that support our veterans who have served this country. Let me turn now to the process. I just want to be very transparent about this new process we've developed about how we arrive at the policy developments and would appreciate feedback or comments. We start by just trying to identify the issues that we think first and foremost flow from our founding principles. So we're not taking on every issue. As you heard Chris say earlier, we're not building a party platform, as you may know from past years. But just to carry through our messaging, we do think it is important to work from the principles and take principled stands as issues arise. What happens is one of us will start an initial draft. We've tried to prioritize some of the topics based on what we see going on in this town in the last several months. And then we begin to share it with our colleagues on the leadership team to get their feedback and their comments. We go through a round of edits and revisions. Eventually, that finds its way up to Senator Danforth, who has the final approval and the final pen on the statements, and then they get posted on the website. So again, it's pretty informal. At some levels, we're still a new startup. Would welcome your comments and thoughts on that process. I might also point out on the website, if you look, there are related blogs and articles, and even one court filing to the case that was just decided by the International Trade Court last night. So Senator Danforth joined an amicus brief on behalf of a number of other distinguished lawyers, filed it with the ITC. As you probably saw the headlines today, the ITC overruled as being unconstitutional Trump's authority to use something known as the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, to invoke his tariffs. So the amicus filing by Senator Danforth and others was quite consistent with what the court ruled last night. And you'll find it posted on our website. I'll call out Lynn Schmidt. She's got at least one, maybe two, I think, columns up there. Look for more from her. We talked to Michael about posting his comments from this morning that I thought were quite inspiring, just to get the message and the word out. So finally, what are our next steps? Peter and I were talking about this, and then he's going to take the tough questions, as I said. We will continue to think about what are the list of topics we want to try to address in the coming months, to develop a set of compelling policy statements that appeal to our supporters, volunteers, people who want to get engaged, yes, donors. We also want to speak to the media and the public at large. We would welcome your ideas. If there's volunteers, if you have ideas for a policy that is consistent with our 5 principles, we'd love to talk to you. You can reach us through the info@ourrepublicanlegacy.com. Get us your thoughts, and we will respond. And once again, just to reemphasize Chris's point, we'd like to think that these policy statements are worthy, will distinguish us from what Trump and his administration is saying and what's going on in Congress, as taking a principled, I will call it a traditional Republican approach to things that approaches things radically different from what MAGA is doing on the range of issues we've addressed so far. Let me pause there and invite comments or questions. And Peter, if I missed anything or overlooked anything? RJ, yes, sir.
Microphone.
Greg, you said Peter would take the tough questions. So, Peter,
you're on.
My tough question for you is, what's it like to work with Greg? But my less tough question is really just a suggestion, I think, on a policy thing. It's a little far afield from our core principles at some level, but I don't have any grandchildren yet, but I do have 4 adult children, and their politics are pretty wide-ranging. The one set of things they agree on is that there is a global environmental existential threat, and that the Green New Deal, throwing every ornament on the Christmas tree, isn't going to get anything done for anybody. So I would urge you to think about the kind of policy that would be consistent with our principles, which I sincerely believe. I became a Republican because it was the party of environmentalism. There's nothing more conservative than conserving God's creation. So I just urge you to think about that.
And thank you. Take that under advisement. Peter, yeah. Thank you, RJ. Others?
Oh, right over here.
Right in the middle.
Emil Frankel.
I know I'm not really advocating this, but I know how how divisive they are. But there's been a lot of commentary that the dividing line in American politics today is as much or more cultural as it is kind of economic class and so forth. And I just wonder whether it's not so much whether it's necessary for us in rebuilding a party for today and tomorrow, and not the party that we all were proudly affiliated with, whether we don't have to in some ways engage some of those at least cultural issues. And I must say, I also incidentally want to connect myself with what RJ said. I mean, I do think we face an absolutely catastrophic danger in the Trump administration going after climate change, even to the point that you're not allowed to use the word climate. I think I just wonder about whether you've thought about addressing those issues, and if so, how.
Great question. To the extent they talk, these issues tread onto the rule of law or free enterprise, even fiscal responsibility, you start talking insurance and climate so I think at some level we were going to have to think about those kind of things, and appreciate you bringing them up.
Microphone. Let's get them on. No, the Zoom can't hear you without a mic. So run up here.
Yeah,
up here.
very much. Very good.
Let's give her a round of applause.
Absolutely. Great job. Greg and I were talking about that at lunch. And I thought Michael said it incredibly well. There is a principle of unity, and the Republican Party was formed around unity, around unifying the country. So there are principles about unifying who we are that I think is consistent with our principles and tradition and can unite Americans. There are certainly cultural elements that divide us. And I would think you could write something, and I like the way Greg has framed our policy papers. You define the issue, you talk about what our position is, and then you talk about what you call for. So there is a way for traditional Republicans to be the party that we always were, which was about unity. And I don't think you have to address every divisive cultural issue in doing that. There are people that can exploit those cultural issues and have done it unbelievably effectively. But that's not the positive message we're going to put out. But I think you can address, from our principle of unity, address issues that you're talking about in a positive way that I hope will sing to our people's better angels and, for the most part, unite. But you are right to hit on it. There are divisive cultural issues that have been exploited, and I think we can address the positive, constructive part without dwelling on the divisive part.
One more here. Peter, get ready.
I just wanted to say I appreciate everything that you all have been saying today about, positive, constructive change, standing against this populist tendency to tear everything down. I'll say that I run a group, the Alliance for American Leadership. We have over 400 volunteers, many young people, but also former employees at state, DOD, USAID, who have all come together to support this idea of American leadership, of countering China, of foreign assistance. And I would love to work with you and anyone here around those ideas, because I think things like countering China, PEPFAR, are really part of the Republican legacy. And, I would love to work with anyone here in any way we can.
Great. Let's talk afterwards.
Definitely.
Sure.
Tracy.
Yes, Tracy.
Oops, sorry. I also wanted to, in terms of unity, we also have to get back to being the party of inclusivity. How long we were known as the Grand Old Party, the Big Tent Party. And we're no longer, I believe, viewed as that. It's more of an isolationist type party that the MAGA has put in place. So, I think in terms of the cultural issues as well, the inclusivity part will help with that when we look at each other as Americans and human beings, and not like these pockets of groups that I think are more separating than unifying. So that's just my 2 points on it. I think that they all can go kind of hand in hand. And that's just how I see it.
Tracy, that's a great point. Once again, Peter and I talked about it at lunch, and it fits very nicely under the unity principle.
Anybody else online or? Great, thanks.
Thank you.
So one of the things I love about this movement is the Republican Party was the party of ideas. I remember Patrick Moynihan talked about the Republican Party was the party of ideas. The Democrats were the dumb party. We were, throughout my career, we were kind of the party of nerdy, wonky, tweedy, smart guys, right? Who would sit around and argue about healthcare and the Laffer curve and the Austrian School of Economics and right all that's what our party was. It certainly is not that today. So I love that we're doing that. But I'm always the guy, and Greg knows this, I'm always the cop pushing back on we've got to stay narrowly focused to our 5 principles. Because if we start getting too far afield of that, we start to very quickly run into, I mean, it's not our mission. We're not a think tank. We're not trying to write a complete Republican platform. And if we get too far afield, we'll start having debates. I mean, we mentioned issues regarding transgender rights today. I promise you there are people in this room who disagree about that one way or the other. And Senator Danforth was purposeful in drawing ORL on 5 core unifying broad principles. So, I mean, some of us are more liberal. I mean, I fought with Republicans my entire career. We can't have that right now. We have to win elections, and we have to do the grassroots work we're talking about. But these guys are geniuses, and we work on drawing up policy statements consistent with our principles. Also, last point, and then last part of the presentation. There is a whole constellation of groups out there in the center-right community, the never Trump, anti-Trump, whatever, pro-democracy, groups out there, many, tons, a bunch of representatives are in this room. As Bill said, we all need to work together. ORL has its niche. Others have different niches, but we need to work together. And 3 of them are here today to make presentations for us, beginning on how their organization and ours can work together. First is Heath Mayo is on Zoom. If you don't know Heath Mayo, you need to. The leader of Principles First, just an incredible organization. He's a great guy. Heath, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks to everyone for having me. I wish I could be there with you in the room today, but wasn't able to make it down to DC, unfortunately. For Principles First, I know a lot of folks in the room going through the introductions are familiar with us. Some are part of us, but for those who aren't aware, Principles First was founded, I guess, in about 2019, 2020. Really in response to CPAC. I've been a longtime member of the Republican Party and was obviously frustrated with the direction it was going under Trump. And I thought CPAC had become sort of a totem of what had happened to the Republican Party. I mean, CPAC, I think a lot of us know, used to be this space where it was always there was always 1 or 2 wild hairs there, but it was this place where the Republican Party got together and the conservative movement, I should say, talked about its ideas and kind of debated back and forth what they would be. And so we thought, let's gather separately and talk about these things in a serious way. And so what started in 2020, I think, has grown now. We've hosted our signature event, the Principles First Summit in DC, the same weekend as CPAC every year in February. And it has grown. It started, our first one was there at the Press Club right before the pandemic. We had about 300 folks. This past year, we're now at the JW Marriott and had over 1,000 people from around the country. And so that is really what Principles First has been all about, focusing on the principles. We have our own statement of 15 principles, which I think are longer than the 5, but I think if you looked at them, they're pretty consistent with the 5 ideas that ORL has put together. Things like truth and objectivity matter. We need leaders that have integrity and that character counts. Separation of powers, responsible stewardship of our environment and our resources. So all of the things that you would find familiar, but I think Principles First comes at it from a grassroots building, bottom up approach. I mean, we've found that the real problem has been the lack of community. I mean, Trump, for all of his warts and all of his flaws, what he gave a lot of Republican voters was an identity to embrace. The red hat, the showing up at the rallies. This was a social identity. People talk about this cultural issue. People really embraced the ability to be a Trump voter. And in their communities, that is a way that they exist and identify with their friends. And that is a lot of how we have found that a lot of voters, how they vote and how they identify politically is this rooted cultural identity. And so what we want to do is we want to build that community at the grassroots level by hosting events in person. So we do this a lot. We host dinners, sort of think your local Lincoln Reagan Day dinners We host these locally now around the country. We were in Chicago and when Dallas before that. We host town halls. We're doing one in New Jersey in a couple of weeks, sort of issues-based town hall where we'll invite people from the community, but also Principals First folks in that area to come and talk about issues. So that is what we're up to. I think I think it's a little bit different, as Chris was mentioning. I mean, there's a lot of groups in this space, and I think that's important because that's sort of how you have a robust civic society. Is you have a bunch of different groups that are all operationalizing and activating folks around these principles. But we do it very much outside of the party system. We say principles first. I think you can think of us as sort of like a tea party, obviously with different aims and ideas, but we've got folks who are center left. Maybe they voted for Democrats. We've got a lot of folks who are in, like I say, in the room today who are center right Republicans. But I think the idea, as Bill Crystal was getting to earlier, is that I think we embrace the idea that we need to be flexible in how we approach. Sometimes we'll be, playing in a Democratic primary, maybe it's a Republican primary, but our focus is really pulling together the people and focusing on these ideas. So honored to be here, happy to be a part of this effort, really focused on the Republican Party because I do think that you do need two healthy parties, and one of them is really sick right now, and the other is lost in the wilderness and doesn't know who it is right now, and we'll see who it becomes. But I do think that there is a usefulness and value to be had in, as Chris said, and Senator Danforth said, showing up, being a pest, making yourself known, not retreating your ground. Because I don't carry the Republican card anymore after Trump won the most recent nomination. It's hard to see that the party represents what I actually believe in today. But if there were standard bearers in the party that managed to win primaries, and there were precinct chairmen around the country that started to change the messaging of the Republican Party and do that hard work bit by bit, think that that's a promising route, I think. So encouraged to be here. Hope to collaborate as we can in terms of bringing people and messaging and all of that good stuff. But it's really an honor to be here and to see so many gathered around what I think is really at a critical moment for our country, obviously, and a challenge that we all face together.
Thank you, Heath. Well, I'll just tell you one thing. I'm never going to miss another summit, and I'm going to, we're going to urge all our people to attend your summit. They're tremendous gatherings of our community. So, thanks. Thank you for being here. Next, we have Thomas Howes from an organization called the Reagan Caucus. If you aren't following them on X and other social medias, you should. They're engaged in something similar to what we're doing, but not exactly the same. So why don't you come up, Thomas, and tell us what you guys are doing? And Matt will load up your PowerPoint, right?
Is this the thing?
Yeah, that's too advanced. He's got to get it up for you.
So we actually have two separate organizations with two different boards. We have a C4, Reagan Caucus Action, and we have a Super PAC, which is the Reagan Caucus. The Super PAC, we started with the Super PAC and realized that we were going to diversify what we wanted to do. So we decided to form a second organization with a separate board. And Reagan Caucus Action, the C4, we chose to being a C4 instead of a C3 because it gave us a lot more flexibility. It allowed us to interact a little bit more with the Super PAC, not insofar as we're allowed to have some donations to the Super PAC, although although it has to be a sort of limited amount, right? And it also allowed us to do some lobbying that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. So the Reagan Caucus Action, Revitalize American Constitutionalism, you can see similar themes to what you guys are all talking about. I would say from a culture standpoint, one of the biggest differences, maybe, you have among Reaganites today, you have like your National Review Reaganites and your Dispatch Reaganites and your Bulwark Reaganites. And I think our people tend to be more of the National Review and Dispatch type Reaganites. But you know what? I think there were so many nasty fights because of the election. I just think if we want to go forward, we have to drop all that stuff and just start working together. So I'm glad that Chris invited me here and we can start that. Hopefully I can, but we also have a difference there, a complementary, as far as the culture being complementary, the mission's complementary. I've never worked in politics, so I don't know anything about it. Chris has worked in politics, and you guys have worked in politics. So we had all these people who wanted us to start things to get people involved in local Republican Party and all of this, and I don't know how anything about that. When he told me what you guys were doing, I was like, perfect. Then I don't have to do it. So when people come to us, we can say, hey, you should go to them instead. Yeah, yeah. So we can pass you guys pass over. So the Reagan Caucus Action, C4, affiliated with the Super PAC, long-term focus on education, community building, policy research, and lobbying. Right. It also can provide some financial support for the PAC, never exceeding 40%. That's what the lawyers tell us. 40%. Like you can technically go over 40%, but it's a risk. You just stay it. No, we they told us you could, but we don't recommend it. Right. So, educational initiatives. We're going to start out our first board meeting. We just got incorporated this month for the C4. And our first board meeting is actually tomorrow, and it's going to be with the lawyers, so we don't screw anything up. Okay. So the early initiatives are a weekly podcast, the Reagan Caucus podcast, daily articles on the website, producing online viral content, right? Memes, short videos. Second phase, maybe once we have more funding, we're going to do a lot of fundraising this summer. Seminars, webinars, public lectures, you get the idea. Maybe down the road then, annual conference summit, maybe research fellowships. We don't know, but one thing at a time, right? Political initiatives, online grassroots lobbying, donations to our super PAC. Second phase, down the road, paid advertisements, advocating policies, online viral media production for indirect lobbying efforts, and then nonpartisan get out to vote, because you guys know the difference. You can't do partisan get out to vote with the C4. You have to do that with the PAC, right? So nonpartisan get out to vote. Hey, maybe even hire lobbyists at some point. Who knows? Those are I say ambitions instead of initiatives for the third phase, right? Here's the super PAC, different logo. This one had very strong. This one's sort of our heartbeat right now because it has very strong organic growth on social media. It grew up to it's almost at 20,000 followers on X after only 1 year, about 14 months. We found a bunch of people who are like-minded people who share our vision and want to join and help out. As website, reagancaucus.org. Emphasis on reshaping the GOP primary electorate by building a Reaganite faction within it. Now, obviously, there's going to be some persuasion on this side, but most of that's going to be done over on the C4 side. The realization is even on a really competitive primary, only about 30 million people show up to Republican primaries, right? There's 228 million other adults, citizens living in the US. Last election, I think it showed that, even if you have a GOP primary now, whatever the polls of registered voters say, maybe only 25% want to vote for more Reaganite candidates as opposed to the more mega, Pat Buchanan candidates, right? But what Nikki Haley showed is you actually have the primary and you can rally more people than that, right? You might be able to get 25 to 40% in some states right now. We got 228 million other people, adults. Why not try to, don't just start once the primary starts, do it all the time. Try to get more people to join our faction within the primaries so we can gradually reshape the GOP primary electorate. That's the main focus. Of course, it's a PAC. They're also going to involve endorsing candidates and all that once you get to that point. We make a point not to never endorse a non-conservative. And we define the conservative as a more traditional American conservative. We don't count people like J.D. Vance, for instance, as a conservative, right? but we also will never endorse Democrat either. That's important for a lot of people that are our members. That it for our type of members who are more on the National Review and Dispatch type, it's important for them for credibility purposes, right? Okay, and I guess that's where we're at. You can follow us at it's New Reagan Caucus on Twitter. The C4 is Reagan Caucus Action on Twitter, and you also have a Facebook for the PAC and Instagram for the PAC that are more nascent. We're still working on the website for the brand new C4 right now. So, any questions? Okay, thank you.
And is Terry Holt in the room? Right. Oh, Terry. Okay, good. Good. I'm sorry. I couldn't. Okay. Terry Holt is with Bright America. Bright America is a new organization that he's going to describe to us. It was launched by our very good friend Austin Weatherford, who was Adam Kinzinger's chief of staff and then worked on the Republicans for Harris campaign. And I kind of was one of the leaders on that and got to know. And Bright America is an outstanding new organization attacking this problem from a different angle. So Terry, as he comes up, is a superstar in the Republican Party. He was the spokesman for the Bush campaign in 2004 when I was working on it. And he was a special advisor to the RNC when I was a member of the RNC. So he has a great history with our party. Terry?
Well, you killed all my talking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bright America emerged from the success of the Republicans for Harris campaign. Yes, that's the main one. This is a group that's gone very quickly. Austin's done a great job of pulling together a diverse community. It's firmly in the moderate to slightly left of center in its temperament, but it has a large following. Bright America has a Substack account that I would recommend to you. It has over 100,000 community members. I've been on a podcast there, and I would encourage participation on that level because it is quite a fertile ground for people that are talking about the different issues that face right of center audiences. One of the biggest accomplishments of Bright America over the last several months since they've been in existence is their commitment to the rule of law and their ability to raise money to put into targeted litigation. They've raised $300,000 so far to help in that process, but also it's part of their commitment over a long haul to create that kind of climate where we can use the courts as one of those bulwarks against the Trump administration. The checks and balances need to be upheld, and we're going to use those courts at Bright America to help engage people and keep them interested. One of the reasons why I'm here today is that I'm also part of other projects that Austin has been a part of and Bright America has been engaged with. Last week, we had a little debate over the parliamentarians' rule in the Senate and upholding the filibuster. There was a debate, though quick it was, about whether or not we should stretch the rules in the Senate further to accommodate a more populist kind of majority control. So we got into that debate a little bit. We're also in an organization called the Cost Coalition that we've launched. We're playing hardball there. We're going after the tax and tariff issues, making sure that the broad majority of Americans who aren't motivated by party, who are motivated by their pocketbook, by the prices and the inflation in their lives, the cost of living generally. So we are using that as a national platform to recycle local information to get it into the mainstream of American dialogue and the narrative. We've been on MSNBC talking about some of these issues. We're going to go all the way around the table and leave no stone unturned when it comes to engaging with the media. Bright America has done a good job of that. And I think you can look to them as a capable partner in the communication of your message. That coalition that they've already got is a built-in group of folks who are already disillusioned by Trump. I came to it fairly early. I supported John Kasich, an old boss of mine. in the 2016 election. We actually worked on his campaign for the New England portion of his campaign. When that fell through, and Kasich didn't go to the convention, I was still stuck going to the convention. I had the Cleveland Clinic as a client, but from there on, I never was in that Trump camp. But it was only last September when I got acquainted with Austin, where I started playing on the other side media-wise, talking to people about a resistance to the Trump dialogue and narrative. And we've made a lot of progress since November and October of last year. When we were first talking to media, nobody wanted to talk to us. They didn't have the bandwidth, and they certainly didn't want to have the other side in the story necessarily. What we found now is that they don't have the bandwidth, the media doesn't, but they do have the interest. They need more of the story working for them so that when you come to them, you've got the elements in place. And one of the most important elements is to have authentic, honest to goodness spokespeople. We did a project on Stop the Nominees where we slowed down and grinded the gears of the Trump administration's worst nominees like Hegseth and Patel. We really got a lot of traction with Judge William Webster, who had run the CIA and the FBI. We're seeing the media take people and examples, authentic ones, and working them into their stories. So we want to be the opposite, the resistance to the narrative that is in the mainstream and corporate media today. And I think groups like ours, this one, Bright America, Cost Coalition, the Reaganites, we will turn it by having a little bit of the same message in our principles and in our values, but with different tactics that go after different audiences and different platforms. So thanks for inviting me. I'm a poor substitute for Austin, who is a real dynamo, but I'm proud to have been working with them and proud to know you guys today.
Thank you. Oh, Chuck. Microphone. Because the people on Zoom can't hear us without a microphone.
Please promote your recent interview with Bright America, that the podcast that I thought was absolutely brilliant. I think everybody in this room would be interested in it. I don't know if we can put up the link, but kudos. It was a wonderful, wonderful podcast.
Well, thank you. It's because of Austin, not me, but right. Okay. I immediately, well, I tweeted it out. You did great too.
Austin was great. Yeah. You were greater.
I put it on social media, but I guess we need to put it on the website. Yes, I agree with you. It was good. I mean, and here's the great thing. Okay. The groups we've talked to today, we're already all working together. Austin had me on his podcast. Austin is listed on our webpage as a strategic partner, as definitely part of our leadership team. He sent out to his huge list notice of this meeting. Heath sent out to his huge list notice of this meeting. Thomas has been retweeting and sharing our content and vice versa. We are all already working together, and that needs to continue because there's a big dragon that we have to slay. So we are at that a wonderful portion of the meeting called closing remarks and good of the order. I'm going to go the other way. Any good of the order? Anybody have anything to say real quick before I close us? We're a little ahead of schedule, which I think everybody appreciates. Tracy has of course she does. Tracy.
I'm sorry. I know I'm a pain in the butt. I wanted to add that I am the Wisconsin chair for Bright America. So there is definitely a cohesiveness with our groups. And the aim is that we can work together to build up this coalition that we have and to benefit, both groups as much as possible. And so I'm very excited about this. And, because, I gotta have my Sherlock Holmes hat where I switch, for Bright America, Our Republican Legacy. But, yeah, I think it's great that we are working together, and I'm glad that you guys addressed that today.
Right. And some of our state chairs are state chairs for Principles First, right, Andrew? There's others too. There's somebody else. Lynn, Principles First. So we're all working together. And that is powerful as we head into 28. Anybody else? If not, then just let me say, first of all, you can't appreciate how emotional this is for some of us. The discussions began in the middle of last summer about ORL becoming this sort of an organization, but this, and then Trump won, which we didn't expect, and there was many weeks of what do we do, what do we do, and some of us just decided to persevere. And people in this room, Greg, Michael, and it's depressing once in a while. We had some difficult meetings, but we got some support and Senator Danforth, and we decided we needed to have this event. And will anybody come? Thank you all. People came, and it's a huge success. And I just want to say, we are just getting started. ORL is not brand new, but in many ways, we are just getting started. It's going to get bigger and better. And the second point, if you all go home and make noise, do stuff, and we will amplify it, and we will continue to do it at our level also. Okay? Thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your day.